We have a sick kid at home today, and despite the fact that I am a work from home parent, my husband took a PTO day or a sick day to take care of her. People often assume that because I work from home that I should be the default for all sick days, no school days, all the things, and I already am the default for most things, right? Like speech therapy 3 times a week, all of those things I already do. But when it comes to sick days or days off from school, this is something my husband and I do together because they are our kids. And just because I work from home, it does not mean my job is any less important or valuable than his job. We earn a very similar income, but for some reason people assume that when you work from home, your job just isn't real and the work doesn't matter, but it absolutely does matter. And the difference between him and I is that he is also a shift worker and I work in corporate. And so my work doesn't really stop. Like when he doesn't go to work, he doesn't have more work tomorrow. He doesn't have to push meetings. Somebody just covers his shift and it's not really a big deal. When I have to miss work, it means I have to push meetings, I have emails piling up, I have a ton of work that I have to get back to. And so yesterday, we got a call at like 2 o'clock that our daughter was sick, and so I picked her up, I took her home, I had her with me for the afternoon, she watched a movie next to me while I worked, and then he said, "Hey babe, what's your day look like tomorrow? Is it easier if I take the day off?" And it was. I have my physical today, and I have a couple different calls that I didn't want to have to move, and so he took the day off, and he's not only taking the day off with her, but he also did the morning drop off for our 3 other kids. And here's the thing. When you have children, people don't often talk about how they're going to handle sick days or no school days, but it's incredibly important that it doesn't fall just to one person due to circumstance. It's a lot of work, it happens all the time, and it needs to be shared. And so my tip to new parents, especially if they are gonna do daycare or anything like that, is talk about sick days early. Talk about PTO days early. How are you guys going to handle no school days? How are you going to handle sick days? Who's going to do the pickup if a kid's sick? Who's going to take the day off because they can't go to school the next day because they have a fever, right? Who's doing these things? How are you making it work? And one person typically, at least what I've seen, has a more flexible job than the other. Not always the case. Like I have friends who both of them do shift work, and so it's not flexible at all. But having these conversations, figuring out what this is going to look like, is so very important because it happens all of the time. And what you don't want to find is that you or your partner becomes the default just by circumstance, because what that does is it breeds resentment and it creates an unequal division when it comes to parenting and taking care of these kids, because it's a lot of work. And I don't think people talk about it enough, and then they start daycare and their kid gets sick left and right, and they're like, what's happening? And one person just ends up being the person that the school calls, and so they end up being the person that picks up the kid, right? And so it's this cycle. And so if you don't talk about it, it's very hard to break the cycle. And so my tip is always talk about sick days, talk about no school days, talk about all these things well before they happen, because once they start happening, you really can't catch a break. And if you have 2 kids, 3 kids, whatever that looks like, what's the saying? If it's not one, it's the other. And if it's not the other, it's both. Prepare.